Good afternoon. Welcome to webinar number 4 of the 2021 webinar series. Today we'll be presenting the Climate Action Panel with special guests, Rebecca Sinclair, Dane Murdoch, Wendy Ross, and Elders Barbara and Clarence Nepinak. So welcome. My name is Chantel Henderson. I am the Indigenous Programs Outreach Coordinator for the First Nations Waste Minimization Project. So welcome here at Green Action Center. Today's Wednesday, April 7th, 2021. So to begin, here is our agenda. So I'm a Ojibwe. I'm originally from Sagin First Nations and Penamutang First Nations. I have been the coordinator here for the First Nations Waste Management Project for the last year and a half. And I would like to, just before we begin, do a land acknowledgement. So the Green Action Center is located on the ancestral lands of the Anishinaabe, Ininu, Anishinawag, Dakota, and the Dene peoples. It is also the homeland of the Métis Nation. We acknowledge that our water is sourced from Shoal Lake 40 First Nation, and the hydroelectricity we use comes from numerous First Nation territories here in Manitoba. I would like to introduce, well, before we do that, I just want to make any attendees aware that we have muted and turned off your video and audio, just so we can provide our panelists an opportunity to do their presentations. And if you have any questions, Beth, you could want to introduce yourself.
Sure. Hi, everyone, and welcome this afternoon. Glad to have you join us. I just wanted to mention that if you're not using Zoom too often, you may not be aware that there's a chat function. If you go along the bottom of the screen, right in the middle, it says chat. And if you click on that, you can put in a question or a comment, say hello to everyone else here. And so you just type it in and then hit return. But the trick is making sure that you look at the drop-down menu and choose all panelists and attendees. Otherwise, only those of us who are presenters will be able to see it. So if you want to share it with everyone, make sure to choose all panelists and attendees. And if you have any issues with other technical things, just put it in the chat box and I'll try to help you out.
All right, so moving on to the next portion of our area here. So I'm going to oh wait, Beth is actually going to introduce our first panelist. Wait, Beth.
Oh, we're hoping that people will see this as a relaxed session, not too formal. So I'd like to welcome Rebecca. And we really should have had Chantel do this introduction because I'm not going to be able to pronounce. Maybe, Rebecca, could you pronounce that for me?
Which part? Naheo and Nisqueyu?
Yes. Naheo. Nahea with Isqueyu.
Hey, I'm learning too.
So Rebecca is a wife and mother of 3, and she's from Barren Lands First Nation and member of Little Saskatchewan First Nation. She moved from Treaty 5 in northern Manitoba to Winnipeg, Treaty 1 territory. to obtain a bachelor's degree, Environmental and Native Studies from the University of Manitoba. Rebecca is the program coordinator for Lake Winnipeg Indigenous Collective and works as an independent Indigenous researcher on decolonizing climate policy. Rebecca pursues higher learning that comes from the land and through learning alongside knowledge keepers. Her childhood spent on the land in northern Manitoba has shaped her understanding and guided her efforts to protect and preserve the great gifts of our sacred earth. So welcome, Rebecca, and feel free to start your presentation.
Yes, Anya, thank you so much for that introduction. Tanse, Masawe, Maskwa, Squiyu, Sigalason, Ochimida, Barren Lands First Nation. Like Beth had said, I am from Barren Lands First Nation and a member of Little Saskatchewan First Nation, married into that nation there. I am the program coordinator for Lake Winnipeg Indigenous Collective. At the collective, our vision is based on the belief that water is sacred. The Lake Winnipeg Indigenous Collective will support efforts to ensure that we have a healthy Lake Winnipeg, restore our people's traditional livelihoods, and ensure that our perspectives lead the protection and sustainability of Lake Winnipeg as a source of life for all future generations. You know, I find it so funny when people introduce me, because I'm like, oh, that's like 2 minutes of my presentation right there. Anyway, so the collective was founded in 2015 by First Nations people around Lake Winnipeg that want to restore the water's livelihoods. Right now at the collective, I am working on a number of projects that mainly, our main goal in terms of First Nation youth is land-based learning camps. I'm going to share my screen to show you guys a little bit about our So here's some pictures from our land-based learning camp prior to COVID-19. Here we were in Norway House Cree Nation on Molson Lake, so just outside of Norway House Cree Nation. We had a number of youth come together on land-based activities. This year, we had a virtual land-based youth camp where we had come together on water quality testing. We had some presentations from Kevin Satie, who did the Lake Winnipeg project, which is rolling out, I think, this year. They're wrapping and pretty well done. So look forward to that. We had some medicine bag making and some guided teachings from Floyd and Faye Sutherland. So that was really nice. I think when we think of the scope of climate change or this narrative of climate change, we're thinking of like this giant concept. We generally think of it nationwide, and we rarely bring it back to the small changes on the land that we're seeing, or the, well, not so small, but the changes on the land that we see. It's small to contextualize like the changes in our medicine and the changes in our waterways and the changes in our access to the land. So that I just wanted to mention that, like, though Lake Winnipeg is regionally in Manitoba, I think the scope of our watershed shows that this is a national issue, and that Lake Winnipeg's healthy waters are it's everybody's concern, and we have an inherent responsibility to protect that. So I think that it's late in the day, and I'm just gasped from the day, so I apologize for my stuttering. I'm normally a little bit better. I'm just kidding. I'm not that great at presentations, but here we go. In addition to the land-based youth camps that we do, we are also working on a relationship to water video series that is rolling out. I'm also working on a learning module for in-school use on habitat, on relationship to the water and kind of a decolonized idea of what Lake Winnipeg is from what we have normally seen. So we're always talking about the fisheries and cottagers, and those things are important. But when we start to look at the decolonized lens of those issues, we see First Nation people and our medicines and how we relate to the land. So I hope that the module or that model that we're coming out with helps to refocus that narrative. We had participated in some water quality sampling with Southern Chiefs Organization's Youth Council. Yeah, that's kind of currently what we're doing with the collective. There's more to come. We're rolling out a podcast. We've had some webinars. All in all, to say that our message is to get across is that Lake Winnipeg is important and that water is sacred. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. I didn't get to see any of the questions or any of that sort of thing because I was sharing my screen, and that's how Zoom works. But yeah, anyway, it's me in a nutshell. So thank you so much for inviting me here to talk, and I look forward to the Q&A and the questions from the audience. Nagosa.
Okay, great. Thanks so much. That was a very interesting presentation, Rebecca. Definitely would love to hear more about it. Those are some interesting pictures. It looked like medicine picking and trapping and learning how to skin and hide animals there. So there was any questions in the chat room?
I think people are holding it till later.
Okay, yes, that's right. All right, so moving on to our next presenter. So let me pull up there. Okay, so here we have, right, so, oops. Trying to hide my menu. All right, so next up we have Dane Wonkman. Dane is Cree and Anishinaabe individual and member of Peguis First Nation, who was raised in the north on the Great Slave Lake and the lands of the Decho Dene peoples. I hope I said that right, Dane. Dane is a graduate student at the University of Manitoba, studying treaty relationship and governance in the Department of Political Studies, where he works with the Mamawipa Win Center for Indigenous Governance and Community-Based Research. Dane is a member of the Manitoba Energy Justice Coalition, which works to engage and organize community efforts to advance climate justice, and works with the group to fight for a responsible Manitoba hydro, which will reconcile its harms to Indigenous communities and the environment. So take it away, Dane.
Here goes it. I'll just start by sharing my screen as well. And someone let me know if I do anything drastically wrong. I think that should be it there. All right. Tanse Bonjour, everyone. My name's Dane Wonkman, Gije Babi Megizine Indigenous. As was said, I'm a researcher at the University of Manitoba and a member of the Manitoba Energy Justice Coalition. And I'll just be talking a little bit about Manitoba Energy Justice Coalition and the role of community engagement and action. I'll start off by just speaking a little bit about the organization. As I said, it is focused heavily on community participation and engagement, as well as direction from community. It's meant to be an organization that largely responds to the needs of community and responds to the direction, I guess, that is sort of already seen as existing in our society, which I'm sure many will agree is unfortunately that of climate change. The organization is largely based on the collaboration and engagement of individuals and leaders in the community coming out and volunteering their own time. It's not meant to be a sort of an organization that is taking direction from the top in any way. We're a flat organization, meaning that we sort of fight the hierarchies that are sort of already seen and witnessed in many different organizations and in sort of the systems which we fight. And we are largely a fluid sort of organization that organizes and takes action where it's needed, and sort of take, I guess, direct that fluid motion. We often consult and sort of engage with communities that are most disadvantaged and affected by specifically climate change and resource extraction. That is why it's sort of very relevant, especially to Indigenous communities and educators. As I've said, we're a largely action-centered organization, and that's sort of present within our committees as well, the committees in which we sort of organize these specific actions and against the what we see that is going wrong largely. We have a few permanent committees, such as one fighting for responsible Manitoba hydro, fighting against pipelines, and one fighting for a Green New Deal. But this is also sort of added on to as needed through community engagement, such as through the Protection of Critical Infrastructure Act, which is Provincial Bill 57. This is sort of another committee that has sprung up recently in response to the proposed bill that has now been delayed till the fall for second reading. But this sort of committee has also begun to sort of work towards some sort of response to this bill or fighting against this bill, hoping that it doesn't sort of go much further in the process, as it's sort of a largely racialized policy that is being proposed. I will touch a little bit more on this later. So just to go into a little bit of the Manitoba Hydro Committee, it largely aims to fight for a voice and resolution to what is often called green energy. We seek to address the effects of our province being heavily invested in and reliant on so-called green energy, and the way that that energy is unevenly sort of affecting Indigenous communities and people. We also aim to sort of address the conflicts that have arisen in communities that are closely either affected or tied to Manitoba hydro developments. These issues have arisen not only with the development and actions of Manitoba Hydro, but also in hydro fulfilling promises to communities that they have impacted or that they've sort of developed near or in. This is also where another community organization named Winiskatan also sort of engages, and we quite often collaborate and support them wherever possible. The name of that organization, again, is Winiskatan, an alliance of hydro-impacted communities. This is one organization that, as I've said, we try to boost the sort of actions of whenever possible. From a public crown corporation perspective, hydro is meant to be very accountable, obviously, to the public, as it's not a private corporation. It is something that is run explicitly for the public. This means that it should not be profit-seeking, but it also means that we should, as a public, have a say in the way that it is organized and run. We have, although, seen in the past that the Public Utility Board has resigned in response to governmental policies, and there has been a continual removal of accountability practices by this corporation. Unfortunately, we also foresee the shift in the future, potentially, of privatizing hydro, just as other provinces have done and just as other crown corporations have been done. We see this as something that will only worsen the effects of this damage to Indigenous communities and lands. And as a private corporation, we believe there will largely be no incentive to build healthy relationships in the long term. And to all this, we've sort of begun actions that will hopefully raise awareness about this, get people in northern communities as well as city, rural communities that will sort of engage with public government, trying to change the direction that we're currently sort of sadly expecting to happen. Just to address then the second standing group that we have, the Anti-Pipeline Solidarity organization or committee, is largely focused on standing with marginalized communities in resistance, which means that while we see fossil fuels as being a very heavily dominant form of energy, we also see that the effect that they have on the climate are well known. And we see that Indigenous peoples have often been leaders of the movement against fossil fuels, as the relation to land is essential even from a Western framework of Indigenous sovereignty. With that in mind, then we do everything we can as an organization to help and place those land and water defenders in the spotlight, keep them safe in their fight, and continue that fight whenever we're sort of able to. This means that most of the time we are there to snap action and provide support to communities, such as in the previous and ongoing fights against, say, the Enbridge Line 3 or other pipeline development projects. We've also been heavily in support of the Wet'suwet'en land defenders. Most recently, the Anti-Pipeline Solidarity Group also held an event on environmental racism in Manitoba. This was an event held over Zoom, and we used the platform that the organization has to raise the voices of Indigenous and marginalized peoples who are affected by the extractivism and irresponsible disregard for communities and sovereignty on these traditional lands and environments. That had quite a few members of our organization in attendance and in speaking, such as Dr. Merle Ballard from Natural Resources and Environmental Management, Josa Manzanella, Philippine-born community organizer with Migrante Manitoba, Dre Smith of Holowado First Nation and Camp Morningstar, and Rita Francis Monias, who spoke a little bit about hydro development in the Pimichikamak Cross Lake area. And I'll sort of, I will reference these sort of events again, potentially, but all of them are available for reference on our website as well, which I'll have a link to later. We also have a committee which is focused on the Green New Deal, which comes from activist origins, sort of calling for a broad policy change. It's an international call, really, that has been going on largely to facilitate change in policy, which we currently see as harming the environment. It's a response that collects activists and organizations and pushes for just policies, However, the Green New Deal has grown beyond just sort of environmental policy to also address sort of the community determinants of that health of the both people and the environment. It has largely grown to include policy regarding those impoverished, the youth that have no say in the policy currently, but will live with consequences, keeping in mind workers as well, as we are not calling for mass unemployment, but rather a shift towards environmentally friendly energy, and as well as sort of lobbying or calling for attention to those who are disenfranchised, such as newcomers, migrants, and Indigenous peoples. We also see the Green New Deal as a way to sort of address the calls of the TRC, as well as provide action in regards to the United Nations Declaration of Rights of Indigenous Peoples. So I guess one thing that's very important for us is, as I mentioned, the current PCIA bill, Provincial Bill 57. We see it as a dangerous legislation, which is largely racially targeted. It has origins from Alberta, which came as a response to the Wet'suwet'en land defenders and Land Back Lane. If you've seen those sort of events, this was all sort of addressed to stop that from ever being able to happen. We want to aim instead to protect the land and water defenders rather than this policy, which is largely going to attack them and criminalize them. We see it as a community response in spirit of understanding that Indigenous peoples are largely more criminalized, more sort of on the front lines than many others, but we also need to protect them, which ironically, the PCIA bill claims it wants to protect the public and critical infrastructure. The wordage of the actual bill has not been released as of yet, but this ironically is not protecting Indigenous peoples, who are some of the most vulnerable communities. As I've said, we also, as an organization, are focused on community, but this means often empowering the voices of others. And the organization has sort of, the MEJC has been sort of built upon principles of nonviolent direct action, just change coming from below rather than directly legislated by people above. We also see that climate justice cannot ignore social justice, as I've sort of tried to weave through everything that I've mentioned before. And we also recognize that relationships and relationality are sort of central to any sort of community organization, but especially something that aims to help Indigenous peoples, as our clan systems, our community systems are largely sort of divergent and not the norm in Western societies. We also see that education is essential, and I certainly hope that this premise of community organization and community coming together to make difference is something that applies to everyone and hopefully can pass on to others. Here's just a photo, I guess, that I added in of one of the actions in the past 2 years now, I guess, as time has sort of gone on, but this was during the time that there were strikes and actions in regards to the Wet'suwet'en land defenders. But yeah, here is our website. You can find us at www.mbenergyjustice.org. And if you want to get involved as well, we have weekly meetings every Tuesday at 7 p.m. More information will be on the website. But thank you for your time. Egosani Miigwech and Masicho.
All right. Thanks for sharing, Dane. This is a very informative presentation. I actually have participated in many of those events. And it's nice to see another organizer there. So yeah, is there any questions? We have a few minutes. Nope. Okay, so we're gonna move on to the next presenter. And that is Wendy. So Beth, would you like to introduce her?
Can you share the bio? I think we already have Wendy's presentation shown.
Yes. Let's see. There you go.
Perfect. That's the agenda. Yeah, Rebecca, you don't have to worry about about not sounding professional because we're being very casual too. So Wendy, welcome Wendy from Sear. So Wendy is from Treaty 5 and has family ties to Cross Lake, Norway House, Fox Lake. And again, I apologize that I'd rather not try to butcher the pronunciation. Located along the Nelson River, but I will learn. She earned a Bachelor of Arts degree and a Master of Arts in Native Studies, examining the political history, governance, and hydro development with the Pamichikamak homelands. Before working at SEER, Wendy was the program coordinator for the NSERC Create H2O program at the University of Manitoba, whose focus was to train graduate students in sciences and engineering to work with First Nation communities on water projects. Wendy has also worked with Fox Lake elders, people who hold the wisdom of their ancestors, on the land and water knowledge studies for Kiosk and Bipole 3. Wow, what a background. Thanks, Wendy, and feel free to start your presentation.
Could you see my presentation share?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay. Oh, thanks everybody. My name is Wendy Ross. As Beth has mentioned, I currently work at the Center for Indigenous Environmental Resources. I've been in the environmental field for about, I would say all my life. I grew up on the land. I grew up in Norway House. I didn't have running water growing up. The backyard was the Gishta CP was my backyard, the back river of where I used to live. And we lived in, I didn't have running water. My grandma didn't have running water, and the other people around my neighborhood didn't have running water, and that's how we lived. We never thought of ourselves as poor. We thought that we were very fortunate and very rich. I felt we weren't, we never really, when people think of rich, they think of money and everything, but I had grandparents, I had my mom and dad, my aunts and uncles, and I also had, the boreal forest, but where I lived, it was mainly muskeg. So as mentioned, this is where my home lands. I took this picture years ago when I was, when I went up north for a trip to visit my family. And so yeah, this is where the junction of the number 6 and PR3, one of the provincial roads into the community. So I just always like to share that. As mentioned, my career, when I graduated with my master's, during that time I worked for Makisosa Gigan, which is Fox Lake Cree Nation, and this is where my partner's from. My partner, that's where his ancestors and his family and his granny, mom, grandpa grew up. And during my 5 years working with Fox Lake, I worked on projects such as with Kiosk, the Kiosk Dam and the Bipole 3 project. And my role was to collect and document the role that we collected the oral history using maps as a way to guide the discussion on the elders and resource harvesters' experiences on the land, both prior to the dam, prior to all the dams on the Nelson River, and with Kiosk. So with this said, our Fox Lake signed on to be part of the Kiosk project. And many people may think that Hydro paid for all of this, but in the end, Fox Lake paid for it, continues to pay for it, will continue to pay for it. And when finally Fox Lake sees benefits, the monetary benefits, it'll be like 50 years from now. So I made an effort to document the information for the people so they could figure out or learn from, create materials. So that was my role with working with Fox Lake. And this picture is one of my last trips to the community. This was a trip where we did a reconnaissance trip from the Kettle Lake to the Nelson River. That was the goal. And using the Kettle River as a way to get to the Nelson River. But during that time, we were it was low water, so we didn't really prepare properly, and our boat wasn't a flat bottom boat, so this was kind of difficult project to do. And so we kind of had an accident, so we had to carry our boats over the rapids, as you can see. So that's kind of the work that I've done, and I enjoy doing. So I guess back to my work now. I worked at when I left the University of Manitoba a couple of years ago. I signed up to work with SEER, and we are Canada's first Indigenous directed environmental nonprofit organization, and we were founded in 1994. We were founded in 1994 by 10 First Nations chiefs around Canada, and we worked with many communities. 450 projects and counting, with over 300 Indigenous nations across Canada. And our main areas are protecting lands and waters and building sustainable communities. Here we go. So our focus areas, as mentioned, water, Indigenous knowledge, biodiversity, youth, sustainable waste management, and renewable energy, and climate change. So those are the areas that we work in. And I get to work on pretty much all these kind of I get taste of all this kind of work where in my role here as a project manager at SEER. So since we're talking about climate change, I decided to talk about the Indigenous Climate Change Adaptation Planning Toolkit. And there's 3 components to this toolkit. One is the Indigenous Climate Change Adaptation Guidance Document. And then the Indigenous Climate Change Language Glossary Workbook, and the Climate Change Planning Workbooks for First Nations, which is 6 guidebooks. This number 3 on this slide, this has been almost, when did we start? From my understanding, it was since 2006. The first editions came out with these guidebooks, and they've been really well used, very well received across Canada. And so within the past 2 years, we, as an organization, we received funding from the government to update the books to reflect, like the year 2020 or 2019. So they're up to date. And so so I'll be focusing mainly on this talk about just the climate change glossary workbook and the work that we've done to do that. So this is the glossary workbook. These could be, I have the website at the back of the presentation, but I could give that to you easily. Just put your email address in the chat and I could send you the link to where all these documents are, but this is how it looks. So we wanted to create, the purpose was to create a resource that can support Indigenous revitalization efforts, specifically in the relationship to environment and climate change. We want to create a resource that encourages cultural learning and understandings of climate change through community and dialogue and collaboration, and support communities with developing glossaries that are useful for climate change planning and adaptation work. Then within these books, we wanted to make things, it's pretty straightforward. It's just one way or a way to collect information or collect language, document our languages into more of a book or a systematic way to document information. So we have different there's different processes, but I find things straightforward. I like spreadsheets, and I like graphs to keep things on progress and on task. So since that's the nature of the work that I'm in, so this is a kind of a sample work plan that's within this document. We want to get people thinking about the resources that communities already have, and ideas on how to form a group, and developing a vision, project goals, and how the project, how to get funding, and brainstorming. So there's all different ways to do it. There's and then in one way, there's not just one way to do things, because as over the year we learned there's many different ways to do this, and this is this one way that we thought could help benefit communities, benefit teachers, even government, anyway. So that's that. So this is the sample narrative, work plan narrative people can use to do the work. So in October 2019, a group of us at SEER, it's pretty much like my first month in my work at SEER. I was put on the we called it ICAP. It was like the thing that I explained earlier, where we updated the guidebooks to to this era or this decade. So we had a 2-day gathering, and a group of us at SEER, we came together. We invited people, elders, with the help of the Indigenous Languages of Manitoba group, to host the organization and host the workshops where we sat around in groups, and we had specific questions, and we guide people. Like we had language speakers at each group that helped. Like myself, like I'm not, full disclosure, I'm a very good eavesdropper in Cree. I understand some, but I'm not fluent. So they were able to help us formulate things and give us how things are said and what things mean. So that was a very good workshop. And this workshop book is on our website, where all the process that we took, and I'll share that with you. But it was a really good day. We had a lot of food. We had food, too much food, but we had everyone. It seemed to me, when we received our feedback, people enjoyed the process, and they were really, the elders there were really happy that a group of we were women, the colleagues of mine were mainly women, and not, I can't speak for myself, but relatively in the youth age. So they're all keen on making sure that we're learning the best way we can. So this was the last day of our work, and it was a good opportunity. It was a good experience that I had with working with Anishinaabe speakers. And yeah, it was. I'm just thinking back. Oh wow, it was such an awesome day. And then originally, we also had a plan to do another language workshop. We had funding to do another one, and we had ideas on maybe we could approach a different community and different language group. We were, this is Anishinaabe, Moin. We were considering maybe Dakota, maybe considering exploring our connections out in British Columbia. But since the pandemic hit, we decided to stay home as best as possible. So we ended up having in the Nimon Workshop. And this was in partnership with Manitoba Indigenous Languages. They really did us a really good favor, because we were the clock was ticking, and we had some funding to do a good workshop. We had funding to go. We had an opportunity to. What we really wanted to do was bring this to the land. Take the principles of the guidebook and bring it to the community. And Aldrich Leask, who works with the Indigenous Languages of Manitoba, was our key facilitator, and he wanted to take it back to Pimichigamak. And so we could work with the community there over a series of a week or so. But due to the pandemic and travel restrictions, Pimicikamak was protecting the community from COVID. So we had to have the meeting in Winnipeg. And since I have some notes. Okay, so we had the meeting in Winnipeg, and it was over. We tried best as possible to be safe, with wearing masks. We're not, as you can see, we're not wearing masks in the picture, but we had them, and we were situated where we had space where we could socially distance. So these pictures were kind of just took our chance and quickly had a smile, and then we, took off or put our masks back on. I wish we had a proof that we had our masks on, but that's not the case. But it was kind of like we had a short turnaround, and I felt, it felt very pressured to doing something really good for this book or this work glossary. And so what we ended up doing was we had little focus groups and telephone calls and Zoom calls with people from out of town. And I'm so grateful that the language, Manitoba Indigenous language, allowed us, took on the project with us, and I was really, really grateful that I got to meet Cree Southerners, people like, I know our territory, our homelands are in the north. A lot of people live in Winnipeg or within Treaty 1 or of course elsewhere. So I really glad to meet people that I could connect with in Winnipeg. But I was also very fortunate to connect with them. There was one of my when I used to live in Nari House, we had one of the teachers. His name was Mr. Swanson. So he wasn't down in Winnipeg because his son lives here. So he came in to have a talk with us, which was really, 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 really good. And we were able to recruit Ernest Monias, the King of the North, to participate in these focus groups discussions. And so it was just like, it was a really good experience considering the time of COVID, and it really allowed us to think, like carefully on how we do things. And I always think about how, Aldrich and, of course, my late dad would be like, we have to do this on the land. This is something that you should do on the land, Wendy. Of course, it's you should. They're not telling me what to do, but that was the thing. But of course, we weren't able to do that. So, someday I hope I could take this guidebook and maybe do a little project with with a community who wants to try this out. So that's something to think about, or even teachers, if there's any teachers listening, and they could give me a call, and I could just show you the book and talk more about the experience. So yeah, there's many reason why we did this. There was a lot of words that are changing. There's new words that are evolving about climate, the weather changing, and plus we also wanted to talk about how things have changed since hydro development on the Nelson River. And we also wanted to talk about how things were kias, I guess, long time ago. People talked about how at once that the ice that froze on the Nelson River used to be like, it would freeze like glass. You could just skate everywhere apparently, and now not so much anymore. So you'll have to go into the guide, the glossaries, which and you could see for yourself, the processes that we've taken to document this in a good way. And plus, like, one thing about my own learning, I always try to think of the values that is embedded within language. And one thing that guides me is, maybe it's a term called Minu Pamat Disuin. And it's always something that my late dad would talk about, and it's about living a good life. And it's so easy to say the good life, but there's so much entailed within that statement where it's everything around you, and how you interact with people, how you interact with the environment, your relationships that you have. It's just some word that I try to principle, it's a philosophy I try to live by. So that's something that driven me to do this work. And the lesson learned that yes, this should be on the land, as I got the that was the strong advice that we couldn't do. There's one quote that I want to share before I just end off, is it resonates with me today, and I'm really glad I got to do this. But as you can see, like I know it's been quoted. I've seen a quote a few times already. Like, wow, our work has gone around. But if you want children to feel holistically again, you have to teach them how to speak their language, take them to the bush, and show them what they need to learn. Those two things are important: language and land. And from there, that is what is going to give us strength to survive, to be taught the laws of the land, and to know how to care and respect will give us the strength. So the stronger we'll become. So that's kind of like, I had 10 minutes and I didn't know how to condense everything and to talk about my positionality, where I come from, and why I do the work that I do. But it's for the children.
Thanks, Wendy. And I was going to say, it's Beth here, that if you want to send those links to the different documents, or I guess it's in here too, and your contact info, I make sure when we send out the recording, the webinar recording, to everyone, that we include the links to those documents. Okay, for sure. I'll do that. I'll do that for sure. And that's pretty much, and there's the link. If you screenshot it, you can screenshot it. It'll be in it'll also be, I'll put in the links as well when I stop talking. And I guess Ginaskumitin, and this is my contact information too. So I'll put that in the chat as well. But yeah, this is very it's nice to, like, I don't see anybody, but earlier it was nice to see people from the Green Action Center and the fellow panelists. I really appreciate learning from both you, Rebecca, and Dane, and I'm looking forward to learning from the two elders next. Ego se.
Right, great job. Thank you so much for sharing. That was, wow.
You're welcome.
I kind of thought I saw Ernest Munoz in there. King in the North. Someone was commenting David was in there as well. But we're going to move on to the next presentation. So if you have any questions or comments, we'll get to that in our Q&A session. Right now, we're going to go to I'm going to quickly introduce Barb and Clarence Nepinak. In here. All right, so Barb and Clarence Nepinak, both are members of Pine Creek First Nation. They raised 4 daughters in Winnipeg and have 2 grandchildren. Bob retired after serving over 35 years working in the federal public sector, while Clarence retired after working in the federal public sector after 27 years. This power couple are very active in the community and sit on numerous boards, committees, councils, and foundations across the country. Barb currently sits on the board of directors for Graffiti Gallery, Asian Opportunity, the Forks Foundation, and the Culture Human Resources Council. It's Ottawa-based. Clarence sits on the board of directors for the St. James Historical Museum and the Healthy Aboriginal Network, which is Vancouver-based. Both are members of the Standing Indigenous Advisory Council to the Canadian Human Rights Museum and are recognized as elders, spiritual, cultural advisors by APTN, First Peoples Investment Incorporated, and the Forks Renewal Corporation. They have received many recognition awards for their community work, such as Keeping the Fires Burning, the Mayor's Citizenship Award, not once but twice, the Queen's Golden Jubilee Award, the Silver Jubilee Award, and the Order of Manitoba. Congrats. They have both been appointed to the National Board for Climate Change by the Federal Government of Canada and will speak about their important work there. So welcome, Barb and Clarence.
Miigwech, thank you. Clarence had to go and lay down, so he was waiting too long, he said.
Oops.
But miigwech kitininim, I acknowledge each and every one of you. Yeah, the work that we do is varied. You know, we do so much different kinds of work, but we don't go looking for it. It comes and finds us. You know, just talking about this climate change proposal process. I remember I was an elder to go and do the opening prayer for the conference. And at that time, it was, you know, a lot of First Nations people. And I sat in the front table, and I didn't know these were the primary funders. These were the bureaucrats. So people were sitting at the front and they were doing presentations. So I'm sitting beside this man who was very chatty, and I didn't know him. And after sitting with him for about, well, I was telling him all day, after sitting with him for about 5 or 4 hours that first day, and then he said to me, "What do you do?" Well, I said, "Oh, I don't know. I'm retired. I don't really do anything." And I said to him, "You know," I said, "I was a previous bureaucrat." I says, "I remember doing this song and dance where you dangled that carrot in front of the, you know, in front of the animal, and they said, 'Here, come and get it,' but you keep pulling it and pulling it away." I said, "This is what this reminds me of." I said, "You know, as I sit here and I look at all those bureaucrats, there's 6 of them. I said, easily they probably make $1 million, you know." And I said, I know because I was in HR for all those years. I said, "I know how this works." I said, "And I hope this isn't one of those events where you're just going to come and dangle that carrot here and say, 'Oh, apply for this,' but you don't know if you're going to get it or not." So I'm going on about this, like, this is, he's irritating me. So then he said, "Can I call you sometime?" I said, "No." I said, "I don't really do anything." I said, "No," he said, "I'd like to send you an email." He said, "I'd like to ask you about an opinion." I said, "Okay." So I gave him my business card, and that was that. Before the meeting was over that day, doesn't he get called over to the front? He was the top person who looked after this program. And then he made reference to my discussion with him, well, my one-sided discussion with him about dangling that carrot. And then he said, "This is all in fairness." He said, "The people that sit on that national council are members from the First Nations community. There's probably about 20 of us there. And some funders sit on there as well. And but a majority of the decisions are made by the Aboriginal people. It goes from coast to coast, and there's another person in Manitoba. That is a part of this climate change council. That's Mike Sutherland from Peguis. And so anyway, but he's a very busy man. You know, he still works, but we don't really work as such. So lo and behold, 2 or 3 weeks later, I get this email from this person, this Jim person that I sat with. And he's inviting us to go to, I think it was Quebec City or something. I can't remember where it was. Oh no, the first one was in Vancouver. So we went to Vancouver. And now we're a part of this process where we had like 200 and 300 proposals from First Nation communities asking for resources. And at that time, when we first sat down, they don't tell us what the budget is like. But we had really good advisors on there, advisors from Health Canada at the time, Agriculture, Environment. These are all organizations, federal government departments that fund projects, because some of them could have been something to do with forestry, something could do with health, something could do with agriculture, you know. So those proposals that were based on that were allocated to those departments. So it was a very lengthy process, very intense. We would meet about 4 or 5 days. Usually the first day we got together, because we all knew each other, we're kind of just socializing the first day, and we're looking at some of the proposals and so forth. Because what they do now is we've modified the proposal process. I don't know how long it's been around, but I know this year it was up for renewal, and I haven't heard anything yet. The last process we assessed was 1.5 years ago, and but resources were allocated, and we make sure that resources are evenly allocated from province to province. Those processes that are very top heavy, we usually like to support the ones that are generated from within the community, where there's community engagement, where there's partnership with youth and elders and stakeholders in the community. Because that really comes out when you look at those proposals. And I've been very fortunate that we've been able to see some of these come to flourish. And so it's good. So it does work. There is resources available, but one of the recommendations we put forth was don't hire a consultant, don't hire a lawyer where they're going to take 40% of your, because I think the maximum is 300,000. And because what we have seen in the beginning was they would hire, First Nations community would hire a consultant company out of Toronto. Just because they hire an Aboriginal person does not mean they understand the needs of our communities. And that's what organizations do. These nonprofits or for-profit organizations, they'll hire 1 or 2 token Indians. And I'm being honest, and we see this happen all the time. And what did they hire these people? So then when they put in a proposal with a community, guess whose signature is on there? Is that token Indian. And it's just so frustrating. A lot of times we know these people. One time it was a relative of mine, and I called her up and I said, "Are you a part of this?" "No," she says, "I just contract with them." So just a word of caution there. But one of the things we recommend after each session, after we do the proposal process, after we assess them all, we make recommendations what changes should take place. And then the following year, the changes are implemented. So, but throughout that year, we promote climate change action process, and we promoted different communities. I remember we Southern Chiefs had a conference here about 2 or 3 years ago, and it was on climate change. So I submitted a request saying, can we just do a 15-20-minute blurb, which turned out to be 3 hours long. But that was okay because we were able to share information with the communities and for them to have access or to put in a proposal so that they can meet the needs of their communities. And I remember one community in northern Manitoba, this lady was sitting beside me at this table, and she started telling me about some of the challenges they have, talking about, let's say, their waste, where they put their waste and stuff like that. And then she said, it got to be so big, and because you're on an island and the community is growing, they had to go to another island to go and dump their waste. And I said to her, well, why don't you just get a committee together, put in a proposal, reach out to a CCHAP, and then they will share that information with you and they will guide you. There's a program officer there. Yeah, you may have this terrific idea in mind, but how do you nurture that? What do you need? The application process is very, for me, when I look at them, it seems very simple. It looks very simple, but I think for what the projects, sometimes you have to make it fit. And that's the challenge, I believe. But I cannot go to a community and say, here, I'll help you, and sit on the other side and assess that application. It just doesn't work like that. And that was another thing, because what was happening is a lot of people, Saskatchewan, Alberta were applying, but there was nobody applying from Manitoba. There was the odd one. So then we started to promote that and sending it to communities, or we sit on this other committee, First Peoples Development, and they're a training component. So what they do is they train people in communities. So when they came together as a board, the director gives us like 20 minutes or half an hour just to go and make a presentation talking about CCHAP so that they can apply for that process. So the resources are there. You just have to follow the guidelines, but it should come from the community, not to hire somebody from out of the community, and to be able to try and fit your needs, because only people that live in the community understand what the needs are. Yes, I'm a First Nations person. I haven't lived in a reserve in over 60 years, but I still have some common understanding. But I too our family didn't have running water. We had no electricity. So to see the change over the years and to see what's happening, it's very encouraging. But First Nations people have to start reaching out instead of always relying on chief and council saying, I want this and I need this and whatever it is they need to survive. They need to be able to access those kind of resources. Maybe sometimes it's a community of people, whether it's to beautify the area, or whether to clean the waste sites, whatever it is, or to create gardening programs. that was another successful thing. And I remember my sister lived in a northern community, and she said it's such a short season to have gardens. And I was said to her, why don't you partner, let's say, with the department, with your education department, get them to order the seeds and then start planting inside. So when it's the right time, even have a greenhouse. So they did that, was very successful until somebody burned it down. So that was another thing. But you know, people are very creative in what to identify what they need in their communities. And if you can do that, take a look at that website. I don't have that website. I know it's CCHAP, Climate Change Adaptation Proposal Process, I think. So look at that, and I know it's coming up. I've seen some emails come out saying if anybody is still interested in sitting on that committee. So I've expressed an interest in doing that. We've been on this committee probably about 10 years, if not longer, but it's good. I like it. And they've also been very creative. Yeah, and a community may have a great idea, but it doesn't quite fit. But then the program manager will work with that community and say, can we just modify it a little bit so that you can still access resources? And it's also multi-year funding as well. So if they start a project 1 year, and if they don't have enough money for the second year, which always happens, they can always submit to bring back that, you know, just to continue on with that project. So it works, and I would encourage you to check that out. And I'm really glad Chantel asked me to ask both of us to sit here and to talk about this, because you have to hear the other side of the story as well. You have to hear those other people that are talking about what resources are there and what involvement there is coming from the community. And thank you for that. Yes, I saw that. And it's something that I would encourage all of you. Check it out. You have nothing to lose. Thank you.
Wow. I always love hearing you speak, Barb. You're such a great storyteller, and it looks like you keep it real.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially when you're sitting beside the funders.
Yeah.
This is awesome.
Yeah.
I'm usually the same way, and then I find out, oh, okay, so they were a funder, eh?
Yeah. Oh, Cheyenne is on the. Yeah.
Oh, she
Yes.
is. She's on the
Cheyenne
same.
Ironman was on.
Yeah, she is a participant.
Good.
She also used to work with. We had her present on the 7th Generation Waste Warriors last year's webinar series. So, yeah, she's in the comments participant. So, thanks for sharing that. Wow, I had no idea. There's just, you know, so many funding opportunities available out there. I totally get with the token Indian there.
Yeah.
With an organization named Guelph, and yeah, I was the 1 or 2 of the token Indians there, and it was very hard because they're focused on like economic development and mining in the Ring of Fire, and it was it's just hurt my heart, even just like in that work experience. So yeah, I end up having to speak up my voice, and now I can't use them as a reference. So, so I think in the end, it's well worth it to always speak up and say, you know, speak your truth. Just, you know, ensure there's no other Indigenous peoples going there, showing up and being the token Indian as well. So thank you so much. Miigwech. Now we're going to move on to if everyone wants to show their videos now. So Rebecca, Dane, Barb, Beth, Wendy, yes, great. Okay, so we're running a bit over time. We do have some time for us to answer some questions in the chat. Which ones did you see there, Beth? And then we'll move on to our. I
think we're good because Wendy went ahead. Thanks so much, Wendy, and answered a couple of questions in the chat column already. So given that we have 20 minutes, I'm thinking let's keep that for the panelists to speak.
Okay, good. All right, so we're gonna go in the same speaking order. So that will be Rebecca first, then Dane, then Wendy, then Barb. So the first question I'm going to ask, I'm gonna share my screen so everyone can see it. Because we are working to promote Indigenous education, First Nation communities, with educators, First Nations youth, schools up north here in Manitoba. We want to know, what do you want Indigenous children and youth to know about climate change?
Can I go first?
Yes, go first.
Yes.
One of the most important things
Oops.
in my view, is to show and demonstrate to children how to respect the environment, how to do that water ceremony, how to do a prayer, offering it to a tree. You know, a simple thing like that goes a long way. When my granddaughter, who's 16 now, I started teaching her when she was about 10. Prior to that, she was a little girl, doing her Barbie thing, but I noticed she was starting to develop, not only physically, but to develop her mind, and to make ideas or make assumptions and things like that. But she always knew that I do the ceremonies and that my husband and I do the ceremonies here. So she's always participated. So she knows protocol. But she wouldn't have known that unless I had showed it to her. And one day she calls me and she says, Kuku, can you do a prayer right away? She said, because we're out camping. And she says, and I could hear the thunderbirds. It wasn't raining yet. And I really value my teachings. I was given the traditional name as Njobine Sikwe, Thunderbird Woman. That's my traditional name. And the elder that gave me that name said to me, one day you're going to realize why you're given that name. And then my children are all grown up already by that time. And I was trying to figure a lot of things out because my parents are no longer here to guide me. And I figured out why I was given that name. And I was given that name because I have to pray for that thunder that's approaching. So my little granddaughter, who was 10 at the time, said, make it stop raining, because we're having fun camping. And I said, it doesn't work like that, sweetheart. What I pray for is I acknowledge that water that comes to our land. I can't say to the Creator, we don't want it to rain because they're camping. It doesn't work like that. So, and I think she really learned a lot with that, just that explanation. But children have to be taught that because it's all connected. The land is connected with the weather, the environment is all connected. And if you can demonstrate that you respect that, it will be kind to you. Quite often in this urban area where we live, you'll see kids walking down the street and they just throw wrappers and stuff like that on the street. And I always go and pick it up. But you know what? These children, they don't know respect. If you don't show them respect and demonstrate to them what respect is, they're not going to know what that is. So I just want to share that and to offer, to talk about the offerings of tobacco. That is so important. We have to teach everybody that. Even people that live in the city here, that are maybe in care or for different reasons, they were not exposed to those kind of teachings. It's our responsibility to teach them. So that's my comment.
Miigwech. All right, Rebecca, how do you want to answer?
I was going to say before Barb started speaking, actually, I think that we need our youth to learn from our knowledge keepers and our elders. That's where we learn about climate change. That's where we learn about the land and the reciprocity and our relationship to that land. We can't think of this big concept of climate change and globalization without understanding our place in this world. much to what Barb was talking about. So I don't know how to follow up to that, but that's what I want kids to know about climate change is reciprocity, living on the land, appreciating that, and learning from your knowledge keepers.
Miigwech. All right, Dane.
Yeah, I think I agree with Rebecca. It's certainly what Barb shared, I think, is resounding and answering the question. But I'd say that I think in addition to that, it's youth is something that sort of comes with inexperience, right? They don't often see the changes that are happening because it's just the way that it has always been for them. But as well as listening to elders and our knowledge holders in our communities, I think it's really just trying to teach the youth less about the individuality of your place in climate and your place in the world and more about the community. And I think that if the youth today have that sort of understanding of the whole community as a role in the environment, they will have that better understanding from our knowledge keepers. They'll have that wealth of knowledge that has been passed on 7 generations and beyond.
Great. And Wendy.
Just reflecting on the question that you asked, it was kind of on my mind for part of the day. So just notes I took our youth children have the power to make change. They are worthy of the world around them. They can ask for help, not to be afraid to ask for help, and to have guts. One of my cousins, Lisa, says you need guts. And what that means is you got to get uncomfortable to succeed. So that's what I maybe I wish I had a clear understanding when I was younger about this. But it's okay to ask for help. We have the power to make change. We're worthy of the world around us, and you got to get uncomfortable to succeed. It's not easy to speak up. It's not easy to make a sign and go protest. But ask your elders, ask your peers, ask your parents, ask your aunties and uncles, your elders, like how to get help and to talk about ideas. Ask your teachers like how to brainstorm. Just be comfortable to ask for help. Sometimes I have problems asking for help, or I take too much on, but I wish I knew that, or maybe I knew it, but just didn't know how to express it back then. So that's my short answer.
Great. I'm so glad you took time to really think about that and put some thought into because the youth are really important. I know personally from my experience that I probably got into the environment, learned about the environment was when I think back in the 80s, maybe early 90s, when they started that, 4R movement, reduce, reuse, recycle, or 3R movement. And they had a, Earth Day parade I was a part of. And ironically, I only got my spirit name 3 years ago. And I swear, if I had known this years ago when I was a youth, I probably would have been more meaningful and standing up for it because I am a sacred tree woman. So I always wondered why I had such a special affinity with trees, and especially when I went to the Bannock Point, the petroforms. Whew, yeah, they are alive.
Yeah, in Nari House, when I was growing up in Nari House, of course our school was Frontier School Division. I guess we started Environmental Club. I guess this must have been 1990. We started the Environmental Club, and we lobbied the IGA and Northern Store to stop using plastic wrapping their fruit. Because if you go into the Northern Store, you see them just wrapped up in that bottom thing that my grandma used to keep, like the cellophane or styrofoam, and then put 3 oranges and wrap it. So we wrote letters and told them to stop doing that. And they did, they did. I'm not too sure. I haven't checked. I haven't gone to the northern. I don't remember last time I went to the Northern Star Nori House, but now I think back on, we made some change. We had a teacher that guided us to do that, and then all of a sudden the IGA store got us a whole bunch of canvas bags that said we care about the environment, so which was really cool. And I think at my parents' house I still have that as a souvenir, like, look what I did when I was 10 years old or something.
It's amazing. Yeah. I don't think I have anything for my youth. All right, so those are some great answers. We have a follow-up question to that one. So what actions do you recommend children, youth, educators in First Nation schools take on climate change? Barb, would you want to start, or Rebecca? Oh, yeah, okay. Go ahead, Rebecca.
Barb, you want to start?
I believe she gave the move on signal.
Okay. I didn't see that because of the sharing of the screen. Okay. First Nation school take on climate change. The more I hear, the more we talk on this discussion, it's like such a nuanced discussion to talk about climate change. There's so much that needs to be said. But I think most importantly is land-based education, language and land, kind of resonating what late Mr. Ross had said, was that language and land are the most important. Our language comes from the land, and in order to have that connection, we need to be able to speak it. And I'm not fluent in my language, and I can feel the more I learn, the more I understand the importance, the more I feel more connected to the land, and I see that with my children as well. And I wish we seen more of that in school. And then Indigenous worldview in the sense that these are our relatives. These aren't things. These aren't resources. We can't take from this without having some reciprocity and giving back and having protocol and acceptance and acknowledgement of the stuff that we take. I think that is like profound, and I never heard that growing up or in school is this idea that the water is my relative, the trees are my relatives, and the animals are my relatives, and I would never treat my mother this way, and I would never treat my favorite cousin this way. So why am I treating the land this way? And I think when we start to look at that worldview or that concept of reciprocity with the land and our relatives, we start to change how we move through the world and how we treat it. So I think that's the most important part. There's so much more important parts, but like the language and the land, and we get the understanding of what our relatives mean to us through the language, and we see that on the land. So like I say,
language. Dane, what actions do you recommend children, youth, educators in First Nation schools take on climate change?
I would say that at least in my sort of education in the North, a lot of it was perhaps outdated, which is sort of the way that sometimes Northern education goes, and that's a hurdle I think that these schools have to take on. But something that I think that action can be done to sort of mitigate that is, as was said even by Rebecca, sort of having land-based knowledge and sharing that. I think that it's all perfectly intertwined. Language, land-based knowledge, and climate change, and our even Indigenous ways of being. They're all sort of something that has to be addressed from a young age, so that I think the youth can have a worldview that reflects, I think, our communities. Something that I think comes along with the hurdle of having outdated like knowledge is that we don't have to necessarily teach what, say, we're being told to teach, right? We don't need to teach people that the environment is about resources. We can do exactly that and teach that the environment is our relatives, and that we have a wealth of connections in our community to the environment and to ourselves, right? So I think that perhaps if that action is anything, is be critical of what we see people calling it resources and in the environment, right? It is a resource, but it's not one to be taken. It's one to be learned from and sort of passed on.
Amazing answer. Totally agree, 100%. All right, Wendy.
Yeah, thanks, Dane, for that. I find myself saying resources. I've been trained my work with you always using that word, and I find myself cringing when I say it sometimes. I feel like, oh, I can't believe this is coming out of my mouth, and I'm trying to find ways to say it better. But you nailed it on the head, or that how that saying goes. But as pretty much I agree with Rebecca and Dane, and just to add on that, this is simple way, just go outside. Go outside. I live in the city, South Winnipeg. I take my daughter outside a lot, even if it's just to Kings Park, and we see the changes in in the seasons through that park. And I was my daughter was very fortunate to have a grandpa who was very would tell her things. They would have conversations, grandpa and daughter granddaughter discussions, and I wasn't privy to those discussions, but connecting with the expert or the land knowledge people, the elders, schools can just go outside, make like maybe just little events like at least at my kids' school, there's something called Walk to School Week. If you can walk to school and then learn about these little emissions that come from fossil fuels, or what other things that like for this example, if there's an issue in the community that you're seeing, that maybe a high school teacher or social studies teacher can discuss like the implications of resource extraction or land theft, or what land back means. I don't know, and explain how it's our response. It's not being taken care of the way it is now, and maybe just instill those values. And it could be an action. It could be even just, as I said, just going outside and having like someone who in the community. I like to say our PhDs, our elders. I guess I've been immersed in Western ways of knowing for a long time. So just connect with people who know the land and who are gentle and kind, and who could inspire that into the minds of children, youth, kids. But that's pretty much all I have to add. I think the other panelists, said really quite eloquently.
Great, miigwech. Barb, if you're in listening distance, you get to sum it up, close it out. Final comments? I'm just going to ask you to unmute yourself.
We recently did a project with First Peoples Development when the lockdown first happened, because they were training these daycare workers in the 25 communities. So these trainings would come to Winnipeg. And then we do work with them and stuff like that, give them ideas and how to work with kids and so forth. So when the lockdown happened, the program manager called them and said, because now they have to spend this money, right? And then they said, what is it you'd like for your community to meet your needs as a caregiver? And then we Zoomed, we had, we talked, we had a conference call, and then they were saying, well, I want something that's culturally appropriate, and I want this, and I want that, and things like that. And so one of the things that they were talking about, mobilizing children as young as, preschool and daycares and stuff like that. So as we were sitting there, I mean, I wear many hats, thinking about my grandkids, what do I do to mobilize them? So one of the things we decided was we did actually several things, and also incorporate language in there. So what the first thing we did was we made a Bannock video. I made Bannock. We had 2 kids standing here. We're teaching them how to make Bannock, and I teach them something very basic, something like I would say to them, the response, let's say the child's first Bannock that they make should be eaten by their father. No matter if it's burnt, no matter what it looks like, that's the responsibility. So I taught them how to make the Bannock. And then because I don't know how long the video is, and in the end, you'll see the parents sitting around the table, and you see us sitting there having Bannock and tea with the kids that made the Bannock. So that's one video that they learned. Yeah, like I say, we did many things, but we incorporated language in there. But we didn't say, this is your teaching. We didn't say that, because we want them to figure out what that teaching is in each of the components that we did. We also made drums, so that the daycare worker said, well, I don't know how to sing. That's not the point. The point is this, that heartbeat, that when you beat that drum, it's the heartbeat of our mothers. Calm these children down. You don't have to sing a song. You don't have to know a traditional song or a spiritual song. Just drum the drum, and maybe make up an English song. Say something like, whether they're Cree or Ojibwe, sing it in English, saying, I am proud that you're Ojibwe, I am proud that you are Cree, do that. So that's another thing. Another thing that they did was they got these stuffy animals, small ones, and they put them, let's say a dog or a cat or, or a horse. We put them in the languages. So then each child will get one. And then what they will do is they will say that name of that animal, let's say as a dog, Animush. This is my friend Animush. And then they would say, I'm going to give it to my friend Chantel over here. And then I walk over there and I give her, this is Animush. That child sitting there could have a cat or could have a horse. So then that child will go over there and say, this is my friend. So they're learning those words. But it was quite a task to be able to find those stuffy animals all over the place. I think we made 25 kits. The other thing we did is we used a dancer, one of our dancers, and we talked about the environment. And this was such a good teaching. At that time, we didn't know it was going to turn out like that. We taught the kids about grass dancing. And then we taught them, we would say to them, out to that open prairie over there, up in a road, out a highway or something, you'll see that tall, tall grass. And then they said, yes. Now raise your hands like this. And then the daycare worker will put on a grass dance song. And then we say to them, pretend you're that grass and you're swaying like this. And you thank Mother Earth for giving you that, to smell that tall grass. So I told them about the beginning of powwows when grass dancers would come out and stomp the grass down. So we actually had a video with this boy, I think he's about 11 or 12. He did a grass dance, and we did it on top of Garbage Hill, if you know what Garbage Hill is. And it was so nice because there was nobody around. It was just us. And so we did a couple of videos like that. We also did a little booklet. And what else did we do? We did a number of, we talked about the drums, what they're made out of. Clarence sat by the river, and they had all these drums laid out, some are elk and deer and moose, and we even have one that is a kangaroo hide. So we talk about all those things. And I think the sooner children are exposed to that, they will have a good understanding, because they have to be sensitized. I always tell my granddaughter, who's 16, I always say to her, back in the day when I started work back in 1971, I started work for the government. I said it was very hard for us, as an Anishinaabe, because I had to break those barriers, and I did, but I had allies. But what I did at the same time is I brought in other people, other allies, and that makes it a whole lot easier for you and for others. But the sooner we expose children, the sooner the better. But if the opportunity is not there, there's always room for learning. Expose children to no matter what age, as long as you start to develop that understanding. Expose them to something, even the simple idea of offering that tobacco to that tree. Okay, that's a start.
All right, great. Miigwech. Thank you, Barb. All right, so from everything I hear, I think the common element is language revitalization, connecting to the land, either through school, through culture, through programs, and even culture, and making that connection. And yeah, I think that's most of the points I got from everyone. So we are a bit over time. So I do want to thank everyone for your contribution, and I just want to say miigwech. I want to close it out. Is there any final closing remarks anyone wants to say? Beth, was there any questions in the comment box that we may have missed before we close out our webinar?
No, I think everything was covered, but the one thing that many of the presenters may not, or others may not have seen, is all of the thank yous and appreciation that attendees were sharing for your knowledge and experience that you guys presented. So thank you for that, and on behalf of all the attendees.
All right. Any final remarks from presenters?
I'd like to make a remark. Cheyenne Iron Man was on the Zoom earlier. When we had approved her project for Sioux Valley, it was so nice to, I was working with her with SEER, then she went on to work for Sioux Valley, and she had made a submission. And I was so thankful that she followed our direction when we said, keep it clean, clear, and concise. And her proposal was exactly that. A proposal doesn't have to be 20 pages. It could be 5 pages. It still meet the needs of the criteria. And she did that. And I tell you, when we reviewed her proposal, it was bang, bang, bang. She met all the criteria. And so it was so good. But then I saw her after. I couldn't tell her because we're not supposed to release any results, right? And so I'm sitting there just smiling at her, oh, I can't tell her. So we had after when they were notified, I told her about that because I had to go and do a prayer for her group, and I said to her, I couldn't tell you. So that was a challenge.
Yeah, I know how that feels.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's great. Any closing remarks, Rebecca, Dane, Wendy?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you so much, Barb, for your words of wisdom. I really appreciate that. It's really good to see you. And Wendy, it's good to see you again. I really enjoyed your presentation. And Dane, first time actually visually meeting you. So hello and nice to meet you. And I really enjoyed everybody's presentation. And thank you so much for sharing with us today. I do have to hop off, so I just want to say Higosane and have a good day, everybody. Manigiskao. Thanks.
Yeah, I would say the same. Thanks everyone and everyone who's attended. I hope that it sort of provided some information for all of you to take back and use in your own way as well.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. It was a nice experience. I think it's my first time doing a webinar, aside from participating in one. So thank you for that, the practice and the stress to perform.
It's an honor. All right.
Okay,
So
good.
this was webinar 4 of a 6-part webinar series for the RISE. RISE is in its 2nd annual series. This webinar is being recorded. So if you didn't get a chance to watch it or you want to share it, it will be uploaded to our YouTube channel on the Green Action Center in a day or 2. So our next remaining 2 webinars is tomorrow. I'll be focusing on outdoor education and Weiwei Sakapa with Eric Mentuck. And he'll discuss the program he started in Weiwei, and that's from 12 to 1. So if you haven't had a chance, get on Eventbrite and register, or check out our Facebook page and it'll show you the link on what Eventbrite where to register. It'll also be held via Zoom. Our last but not least webinar will be next week on April 15th from 12 to 1 as well. It'll be land-based education with Taylor Galvin. Sorry, I forgot to update the date here and time, but I will do that now. So I want to thank everyone who participated and was involved in the discussion. This is a very important issue and topic, and we got a lot of good points and feedback. So if you're an educator, please take this information and try to apply it in or outside the classroom in whatever way you can. Would you also like to say anything, Beth?
Just thank you again. I really enjoyed listening today. Very, very informative.
All right. All right. So thanks, everyone. We're going to close it out and have a good week.
Okay, take care.
Bye.
Bye.